Welcome to More Than Legal, the show where we go behind the scenes to uncover the fine print of power, purpose, and profit. I'm your host, attorney Danielle Laughlin. After almost 2 decades in the trenches of courtrooms and boardrooms, I have learned that every move leaves a mark and every deal tells a story. What will we uncover today? Let's find out. Hey, real quick, before we dive into the episode, remember, nothing you hear on this podcast is intended to be legal, financial, or tax advice. I invite you to contact any of the guests you hear by looking in the show notes for their contact information, or if you'd like to reach out to me, you can find my contact information at daniellelaughlin.com. All right, now let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to More Than Legal. I'm your host, Danielle Laughlin, and I'm here with Coury Deeb, who's going to talk to us about some incredible work that he's been doing in the filmmaking space, both in the for-profit commercial and filmmaking side, and also in the not-for-profit filmmaking side, which is where I think you guys are going to get some incredible stories and value today. Coury and I met through a common network and a person that we know, Alexander McCoven, over at Liberty Ventures. And so that kind of brings together like-minded entrepreneurs and business leaders that want to do business for good. And that's where Coury and I kind of started talking. And through those conversations, I realized he had so much to offer to our audience. And he's been gracious to come here today to talk to us about his journey. So Coury, could you just share with our listeners, who are you? What's your kind of story, and how did you get to where you are today with Nadus Films? You are the founder of Nadus Films, and you also have the Give a Story program, which is the really interesting and cool part of what you guys do, in addition to incredible filmography and production. But what makes you Coury, and how did you get to this place?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle, for having me on. Respect you and all the work you're doing. So thank you. Yeah, founder and director to Nadus Films. We'll get into why it's called Nadus here in a little while, because that's a story in of itself. But yeah, I've been at it for over 20 years, based here in Louisville, Kentucky, lived in Philly for a good long stint, but born and raised here in the Bluegrass. And we've been at it for 20 years, and we've had the privilege to produce content in 30 countries and across 30 states. So that content is feature films, TV series, commercial content, serving nonprofits, and really everything in between. So I run a crew. We're pretty boutique on purpose, to be able to pick and tell the stories that we want to tell globally.
Awesome. I love it. I love boutique, because that's the part that I'm so intrigued by, right? Because in the world of business, you can make money in a lot of ways, and especially in your industry, right? Where it is, especially now, kind of a wild, wild west, if you will, of an industry, and
It
with all
is.
the changes. And so let's talk a little bit about that. When you say pick and choose those stories that you want to tell, what are you looking for? Where do you see the vision of Nadus? And maybe that gets into why you named it Nadus too.
Yeah, let's start with why we named it Nadus, because that's really the roots of where we came from. And so we've got our own 501c3. We have since 2007. And so my wife and I were attending a church up in Philly, coincidentally called Liberty. And there was a gentleman by the name of Celestin Musikera speaking, still friends with him today. And he's Rwandan, and he started an organization in Africa called ALARM, which stands for African Leadership and Reconciliation Ministries. Well, Rwanda, of course, went through that horrific genocide, and Celestin's family was murdered in the pews in which they worshipped. So he had this choice. He said, I hit this crossroads, this fork in the road, where I could forgive and seek reconciliation, or I could go after and seek justice. And my definition of justice, which is, payback, right?
Right.
So he chose reconciliation. Good on him. I don't know if I would have, but he did.
Right.
So anyways, he was, he's in all these countries in Africa, being African. And one of those countries was Sudan. And he was talking all about the plight of the Sudanese. And Less so back then, but even more so today, we are just so inundated with the needs of people, local, global, and it so quickly enters one ear and exits the other. But something really struck me that day. I was a full-time photographer at that time in my life, running my own company, and I just was like, man, why can't I go and tell stories alongside Celestin and his partners there on the ground? So I went up to him and I said, Celestin, you don't know me, but man, I would love to pay my way, go and give a voice to the voiceless in Sudan. He said, let's go, brother. So just a few months after that, we were puddle jumping in a Cessna plane, traveling throughout Sudan, which is now southern Sudan, and we were stepping over landmines and walking through just fields with broken tanks, and I really found a passion. What I was good at was pulling stories out of people, and again giving a voice to the voiceless, and seeing donations as a result of that, while also being fed in that adventure, thrill-seeking idiot kind of persona, which I organically kind of have become in my life, for good reason. And so it was this like, man, I feel like they're feeding me more than I'm feeding them, but they're selling me the opposite. So it's like, hell, this is working. Well, let's continue on. So I came back to the States and was like, man, I found my calling, and decided to call it Nadus, which is Sudan spelled backwards. And so keeping them at really the core of who Nadus started, it's because of the Sudanese that we got our voice while also giving them a voice. And to this day, even just yesterday, I was texting with partners there, looking at doing more stories to continue to help them rebuild, build, and become more prosperous in their lives.
Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. Just first of all, following what I think we share our Christianity together, and just we're called to kind of go out into the world and to serve the least among us. And you took the opportunity to do that with your gift that you otherwise are using to take care of your family and financially support the needs that you have in your life. And it's one of the things about you that I find so unique. It's hard to do that in today's world. And you've been at this for a long time, since 2007. That's a, that's,
2005, yeah.
or 2005. Okay. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Because Natus came after that. So makes sense. So 2005, now we've got 20 years plus of
Hmm.
this journey. And in that 20 years, wow, what an incredible difference the world has gone through. I remember those days. I was actually leaving college, heading into law school in '08. And then even now, it's like AI, post-COVID world,
The
like all the
landscape's changed.
landscape has changed. Um, Tell us a little bit about, how have those stories changed? Have you seen any threads of like where maybe positive change has occurred, and maybe where there's still a
Hmm.
gap
Yeah.
that somebody listening may feel compelled to step into and help with?
Yeah, the encouraging thing is that stories don't change, right? How we tell the stories don't change. That's tried and true for thousands and thousands of years. What does change is the platform and the distribution in which you chase, right? To get those stories out there, right? YouTube came out in early 2000s, and look at it now. When it came out, we were like, oh wow, that's just cheap distribution. There's really no respect there, but now it's turned into this massive distribution model, which can pay, but not necessarily. So really, the distribution is what's changed mostly. And so the stories that we tell, we've got really two arms to what Native Films does. We've got our commercial kind of for-profit arm, and we work with Fortune 100 companies, startups, and everything in between. So we work with Temper Sealy and horse farms here in Kentucky, and UPS and financial institutions, and those are great. So commercial work feeds the family often, but meaningful work is what feeds my soul. And that's really where the nonprofit thrives. And that's what we do. We do call Give a Story grants. because we believe nonprofits have the best stories to tell, but the least amount of resources to tell them. So we've figured out and kind of created a mechanism through our donors and through our profits where we can do matching grants, sometimes full grants depending upon the season. But nonprofits, they apply. Application's really easy. We've got a platform that further allows us to fundraise alongside of them, and we match those donor dollars. And as a result, we've got the metrics to share it. We see a 5, 10, 20x return on that investment of what it costs to produce it. So easy numbers, right? If something costs $50,000 to produce, not only does that nonprofit now have powerful tools to further fundraise and separate them from an already competitive, saturated market where it's really hard to stand out because there's so many worthless nonprofits out there as well as worthy nonprofits, right? We want to separate them from the noise. But that tool that we built for them also goes on to raise much more than it costs to produce it, while also us putting skin in the game. So that's really where the why I get up in the morning, professionally, is to be able to tell those stories that have a cultural global impact versus only making brands, wallets thicker.
Oh, there's so much in what you just said. First, I'm going to kind of go on worthless nonprofits. No offense, but a lot of times we work with successful entrepreneurs. They get wealth, they're building businesses, they want to do good in the world. There's tax advantages to 501c3s in some respects, and you can kind of create these tax efficiency ideas. And they get these experts that tell them that, you can do this and you can create this nonprofit. And now you can go do all the good that you want to do through this nonprofit. My perspective is that a lot of those worthless nonprofits are the result of that type of thinking, which is very much still a profit motivated thinking, trying to figure out the loopholes to make the not-for-profit world a profit world. Yeah. And then we get into what you're alluding to. So I love that you really are focused on who are the worthy stories that we really want to hear it and need to be told, and not just necessarily the ones that maybe have the most existing financial support resources or public personas out there. So I really love that part of it. And I also love how, the original story from Sudan, I mean, first of all, I agree with you. Retribution would definitely be my first response to a horrific situation like that. But for hopefully a spiritual anointing that may occur between the time that I exercise the retribution, right? But also in the world of business, that's what I pick up from you that I think is very valuable, which is business can be used for ruin. It can be used for exploitation, but it also can be used to make the world a more prosperous place. And the motivation to help others is obviously where you, like you said, that's your fuel. Have you ever had to make a decision or say no to something along the way? Maybe a big commercial client or some opportunity that was going to push against the ethical, purpose-driven side of what you're trying to achieve?
Sure. Profit's a tool. It's a terrible God, right? And so we see profit as an opportunity to unlock more, to be able to serve and do good with, right? Going back to, the kind of the faith Christian component, it really kind of, this is after Nadus started. A friend of mine said, "Man, you're living 1 Peter 4:10." I was like, "I don't know let's look it up." Right. And it's administer God's grace in its various forms by using what you're good at to serve. Right. So if you're good at making profit, then use that profit. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Capitalism, use it. That's your platform. Use it. And so we definitely use the commercial side as the profit intention to be able to serve the nonprofit and be able to just give our time and resources away. And that's where the biggest joy, comes in. And going back to the nonprofit kind of, tantrum, I guess you could say, there's no difference between nonprofits and for profits and even churches. There's a lot of bad ones out there that are just existing for the sake of existing. And so it's how do we leverage, how do we do more, make more in order to give away? That might be a nonprofit model, it might be a for profit model. It's not for me to say in that specific situation. And so going back to your question though, of have we had to say no to stuff? Absolutely. We've had to fire clients before just because it's become so abusive, and their understanding and respect of a process that we've laid out from A to Z, because we don't want to just spend so much time and waste so much time on someone that doesn't have the respect of story and process and all of that. So there are times where we do have to accept jobs that we might not fully love, but we do believe in them enough because we'll never jeopardize our ethics, our morals, our compass, in order to turn a dollar.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I know for my part, like when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, it was like you have a vision, you know what you're trying to achieve, then you get out there and maybe it doesn't always respond the way that you think it should.
Rarely.
Or want it to.
I'm going to go ahead and say never.
Never.
Rarely.
Never does that.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I feel like the vision I had day one and kind of where we've now gotten after 10 years is like, finally, we're starting to kind of get some traction there. You've been at this game for a while. Did you notice that yourself? Like, when did you kind of turn on this light bulb idea of, yes, like you said, sometimes you have to take work that may not be 100% aligned.
Yeah, you still have a family to feed.
You have a family to feed. We have like A through F ratings, right? And it's like, if you get a C, it's like, all right, either we can find a common ground or not. And, if we can't, then we got to let you go. But as long as you could be a B player, or a modifiable C, like you can hang out here. Do you have anything like that? And did you always start? I mean, I guess maybe my question is more direct, which is, did you start out like that? Where you just were like, look, like this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm not doing? Or was that more of an evolutionary process through your business journey?
I think it can be both. I mean, you definitely start in an amateur whatever field. For me, filmmaker, right? I didn't go to school. I was a photographer, right? But I had the ability in my personality to be able to talk with people and really kind of creatively pull things out of them and tell something different. And we cut our teeth in the bush of Africa, which, how many people can say that? Doesn't make us better, it just makes us different, right? And so with our ability to be able to tell those stories differently, we did start off with kind of this, hey, here's who we are, right? We're building a brand. Remember, a brand isn't what you say it is, it's what other people say. And so for us, it was like, all right, here's what we want to be, and here's the stories we want to tell. And so the needle is very sensitive on this end, on who we lock arms with, not just from a partner perspective, but from a team, like the culture of Nadus. I mean, people are really, really happy who work here. We treat our employees really, really well. Those that aren't here are always like, we hear great things at Nadus. I just left this other job because it was so toxic. And it's not that we don't have issues. It just means we fight really hard for a good, healthy culture here. And we have to, because when we are, in Iraq, filming, there on the grounds, like you need a really tight crew. When we're in Guatemala City and there's, bullets flying around, like you need a really, really tight crew. This isn't just a contracted job of, hey, come with us. Like, no, like we travel well together because we're brothers and sisters. And so now we have that at the beginning of like, this is who we are. This is kind of our brand book, if you will, internally. And then that develops into the brand of Nadus Films. And it the reason I said it's a both and to your original question is because it definitely evolves. It becomes fluid, right? We started a for-profit entity to Nadus Films in order to help sustain us because we can't always rely on donations, right? We've got this skill. Let's not keep it, only for, those crazy stories, and there's 1,000 of them on this end. But we also do need to film, things that might not be as sexy, but definitely like give us that whole body workout. Sometimes that's the metaphor I use. It's just like if you only focus on legs, it's like you're going to look kind of funny, right? If you only work on like bench, you're going to look kind of funny. So Nadus Films has really refined its storytelling approach through a diverse kind of eclectic group of clients and partners to be able to tell stories. There hasn't been a story that we haven't been able to tell that we got hired for. So it's that full body workout. And we do say no sometimes, but we do become a little bit fluid on, hey, here's what we're going to do and here's who we're becoming. And that's just age, right? I mean, who you were 20 years ago, right,
Right.
is different than you are today, but that doesn't mean you've jeopardized what you started out to do. Maybe there's been seasons where you had to like course correct and kind of recalibrate. For sure on this end, it's just like, what the hell am I doing today? Like
Yeah.
I'm too stuck in, this one client or this project because we're hungry. You know what I mean? Like we have to focus on like why we're here and what we're doing. Because the older I get, the more I care about work that actually matters, right? And I'm less interested in looking important than building something meaningful. And so those are all kind of questions I ask myself, not enough, but I try to ask myself in order to really stay on target and make films that make a difference. And that's really our mantra here at Nadus.
I think your story is very unique and interesting. If some of the reasons you've pointed out, but like as a person, listening to you and based on prior conversations we've had. So I wanted to be a Nat Geo photographer. I used to live in the darkroom and loved it. And I thought, oh, I just want to travel the world, that adventure, helping and focusing on where the world is beautiful, but also maybe broken. And I feel like that part of it, that exploratory adventure part of it, combined with what you clearly exuberate, which is it's not about you, right? Like a photographer is like focused on the subject. It's like you never even maybe see their name, right? You would see these beautiful photos, but their name's like a little tiny print on the bottom. No, but
Yeah.
other than like aficionados of photography, they don't really have these huge followings, right? And so I think that part of your story is really what kind of gives this Nadus Films just such a levity almost, even though it's a very the nonprofit side is a very serious matter, but it gives it a levity around the business itself. And I like as a lawyer, I see under the hood of a lot of different very successful companies, some that maybe are struggling. And levity is hard to find. And so where do you think that comes from? Is that part of kind of your personality? Is that part of your spirituality and your being a Christian person? How do you see that from your perspective? And have you ever kind of thought about that? I know it's kind of a random question, but I believe that levity frees us to be more creative, but also more others focused. And so have you ever kind of thought about that? Have you ever heard that from anybody else?
Yeah. Good question. Good question. An important one. And of course, levity is going to vary from year to year, right?
Sure.
Like anything else, right? So the easy answer would be, oh, it's a little bit of everything. It's just my passion, it's my personality, it's my faith, And although I do think that's true, it's never one thing in life. Rarely is it ever one thing in life. I think my desire is selfish in the sense that I want to do what I want to do. And it happens to be filming and serving and telling stories and, being adventurous and flying off of Kilimanjaro and, spending time with Maasai warrior. Like there is a degree of selfishness to that. And I accept that. Like I'm cool. Like we're all selfish. That's my
Absolutely.
selfishness. And now how can I harness that selfishness, right? To actually do good and serve. And that's good too. And I think that's really ultimately what matters. Like I found something I love. Okay, I'm rewarded and fulfilled and et cetera from that. But is that giving life? Like, is that helping other people? Because I want to be fed. I need to be fed, right? In order to be sustained, right? Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, like all of these things. But how am I actually leveraging that? The levity, how can I actually leverage that to impact? And that's the true reward. It's not being able to make bills. It's not being able to go on this vacation. Those are all perks, but that all flees. Like I can be forgotten when I die. Like I'm okay with that. Like this, I'm not in this for some big ego trip. But I really want to leave something behind. I want to leave the world better than I was born into. And if that means just, serving and being rewarded as a result of that, then I think that's a beautiful picture.
It is a beautiful picture. And, we've talked a little bit around the profit motive. We've talked about kind of that impact story. I was actually reading the parable of the talents, like literally just yesterday. And I kind of got there randomly. And I read like a little footnote because I was reading it online and there's like the little footnote. And I didn't know this, but I think this is important and it kind of gets to what you're talking about. Like with the parable of the talents, we know there's like, one of the servants got 5 talents and made 5 more. One got 2, made 2 more. One got 1 and buried it and did nothing with
Mhm.
it. Right.
He's a
And so,
moron.
yeah, right. Exactly. And so like, and that parable to me is like one of the most powerful ones that I ever heard and learned because it showed me like God will reward those who have plenty with more when they go out and make more, because that growth and that making the world a better place is what I believe is the purpose of every human, and how that manifests itself is going to be unique to that individual. But what you said, it makes me think about something about the footnote, which was one talent was 20 years of a servant's labor.
Mhm.
So 5 talents was whatever that is, 100 years,
Two generations,
2
basically.
generations of wealth in the hands of somebody. And I think about that a lot because, like you're saying, we know we're going to leave this world. We're not going to take any of this stuff with us. And so to me, it's like really honing in on what you're describing, which is you're not like, it's not about you. It's about the generational impact of how that wealth, again, wealth of more than money, wealth of generosity of spirit,
Mhm.
really, and how that kind of plays into what the world looks like after you're gone. I
Mhm.
think that's so powerful. And it's part of what a lot of entrepreneurs kind of suppress as they are trying to pay the bills,
Sure.
take care of their families, and all of that. So I think it kind of brings us to a place now where, let's kind of close out the conversation. And I'd love to hear from you in this idea of I have to eat and I have to take care of the ones that I've been entrusted to take care of. Where do you find the motivation to still give and focus on others when maybe you are hungry, right? And like you said, every season will be different, and sometimes you got to stay more focused on yourself so that your cup is full enough to kind of pour into
Right.
others.
Yeah. Put your mask on first on the
Put your
plane.
mask on first.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
kind of ideas do you have for those out there? And they may not be Christian faith, of course. I don't think
Sure.
either care much about that idea. Choose what you choose. But is there something you could share with us about what do you do when times are low, and how do you get back into that mindset of giving?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things come to mind. One is just accept the fact that it is an emotionally abusive, world, especially as an entrepreneur, right? So many young bucks, men and women, start something without the, I think, acceptance of you're going to get abused, at least emotionally, when you're trying to fight for what you believe in and what you want to do. And hopefully those are good, true, and beautiful things that you're fighting for, right? Secondly, being a leader is extremely lonely. And most people are not leaders. And so they don't understand the weight a leader has in providing for their employees who are married, who have kids, let alone their own personal family. And we're all figuring it out as we go along, right? Especially as we age, and our perspectives change, right? Our needs change. The landscape that we don't control, of course, changes, which we touched on a little bit at the beginning. And so, what keeps me going is that I have, I believe, responded to a calling in my life that gives me more value and more purpose than profit could ever do. And that's my true north, and that's what really sustains me, is my relationship with Christ, and being able to just see as everything else is noise, right? It's a blade of grass in the wind. It fades, it goes away, it dies, it grows back, all these things. And so finding our worth in something that gives us that purpose, that is that First Peter 4:10, is it's the only thing that's going to give you that breath that's needed. Everything else are perks and needed and things like that. But that, if I'm honest, is what's going to give me that sustainable truth that I need to swallow every day.
I love that. It's the soul work, right? When the mind is always trying to drive,
Mhm.
and like you said, it's lonely. There's a lot of pressure. People become entrepreneurs for various reasons. So
Sure.
some are, I talk a little bit about this. Some are profit driven, and that's really all they care about. And I'm like, to me, in business, that's ethical. I don't, the only time it becomes unethical is when it becomes exploitative, or, I mean, that there
Mhm.
is a clear line of like when you've crossed the boundary. But if you're honest about that, you can find a lot of people coming to work with you on a vision towards making more money.
Sure.
A lot of people are
Sure.
motivated by that. So I think too, like, I love that you point that out, because one of the things that I love to talk about is how do you balance that profit motive with that stakeholder view of the world. And you have to figure out a balance,
Only
because
you
that
can do that. Yeah.
only you can. And you have to know thyself first. And like you said, find a true north. And whatever that is, it's God for us, it's Christ, maybe it's universe, whatever that power and source is. I think that is the first step. And once you can place that at the center and let everything else be around the periphery, even when you go off track, that you can get back, and you can get back on track. And
Mhm.
it's great that you have harnessed that within the manifestation of your both
Mhm.
for-profit and not-for-profit business
Mhm.
model. Um,
One
so
thing, one thing I do want to make clear, though, which somebody, I just don't want there to be any confusion out there. Everything that we've talked about can be done without profit, right?
yes,
All that we've talked about can be done without just striving to make money in order to give it away, right? The work at home, stay at home mom, right?
yes,
Who's
absolutely.
not the entrepreneur. Like, she finds her purpose and drive, and she's making the world a better place by raising, along with her partner, awesome sons and daughters, right? And so, and there's a million jobs out there, that do not fit the mold of entrepreneurial, profitable, etc. And their purpose is just as important as mine. And so, I think when we kind of realize that, and when that person who's a janitor, they can see that and be like, yeah, like, my goal is to not make as much money as I can, is to be a really good steward of what I'm doing and
Yes.
serve well and engage throughout the day with, person X, Y, and Z, like, and just be a light, to those people, regardless of what you believe. You have the ability to do that.
I absolutely agree. I'm glad you said that too, because yeah, I mean, or even when you like, we speak primarily to entrepreneurs, like that's our primary
Sure.
audience. But I think too, even for those of us that are here, like for that reason, anything could come up along the pathway of life that could stop you from being an entrepreneur and stop you from being able to actually
For good
pursue.
reason.
Yeah, exactly. Caregiving being a primary example of that.
Right.
And there's,
Right.
various types of issues. I've got a client that is in that space, really trying to support caregivers.
Everything changes. Yeah.
Everything changes. And so that's why that source and that purpose is so critical,
Hmm.
because, money is not enough. It's just
No.
not.
No, I
And
know some of the wealthiest people, and they're not necessarily the happiest. And
they're not.
The poorest kids that are in, whatever country, whatever developing country, you're going to see more joy from them.
It's so
So,
true. It's
yeah,
so true. There's so much. We're gonna have you back because like
sure.
there's about 6 different things that my little brain kind of hooked in on during our conversation today.
Yeah. Make a
I think,
note.
yeah, I will, because there is a lot there, and I think the poverty and wealth discussion is an important one. I read a statistic the other day, or maybe I heard it from somebody, I don't remember, but right around $70,000 a year US is kind of where like
Threshold.
a threshold for where like financial happiness actually kind of ends, and there's like only marginal increase from there,
Yeah.
which is so interesting to me because so many people think more money is going to make them happier,
Right. Right.
and it's like that's not going to make you
Yeah.
happier. So
The
but you got,
lottery is a perfect example.
yeah, and I think too there's some value in experiencing poverty, whether for me, I grew up poor. I mean, American poor, but like, I grew
Mhm.
up poor. Other people maybe didn't have that, but maybe they experienced poverty through others directly, kind of like what you're describing in these other countries. Um, and then sometimes folks are just striving for money only and that profit motive only because they believe it's going to give them freedom, but
Hmm.
it actually doesn't. And sometimes it
Hmm.
creates more bondage.
Yeah,
So
it's what I said earlier. Profit is a tool. It's a horrible god,
it
And
really is.
so, if we keep that before us, then I think we'll see things a little differently.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Coury, let's close out by, you've already shared some really amazing viewpoints and knowledge here. If you have any last tips or anything for those folks that are listening, please share that. And also, we'd like to know, how can folks find you online? Where do you want them to go first? What do you want them to know you for, and where to go to connect with you in the best way?
Yeah, like most places online. I mean, Nadus Films, Nadus Films. Of course, it's Sudan spelled backward. And so that's where you can go and see our for-profit and nonprofit work. You can get in touch with us, and of course, all the social channels. But yeah, we'd love to learn and hear from those that are interested in clarifying their story, having it told, and seeing impact as a result.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Coury. It's been a pleasure to see you today. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in. Please stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for coming. Bye for
Thank you,
now.
Danielle. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. Remember, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay tuned for our next episode. Bye for now.